Randonautica promises adventure through random coordinates, but sometimes what you discover is far more sinister than you could ever imagine. These three true stories will make you think twice before exploring the unknown. Randonautica, an app that uses random number generation and location data to send users to mysterious, uncharted places, quickly became a viral sensation in early 2020. People, cooped up during lockdowns, used it to escape the monotony of their homes, seeking adventure and sometimes even thrills. But for a few unlucky users, the places they were led to held far darker secrets than they anticipated. One of those users was David, a young man who, in August of that year, decided to try the app after seeing countless videos of strange findings. He and his best friend Alex decided to make a day of it. The weather was warm, the sky clear, and they had nothing better to do, so they fired up the app and started generating locations. The first few coordinates took them to places that were either inaccessible or simply uninteresting, private properties and empty fields. It was a little disappointing. They were about to give up when the app provided one more set of coordinates, this time leading to a remote area just outside town. The location intrigued them. Anomalies, as the app called them, were supposedly spots where unusual things could happen, and this one was located in a dense wooded area neither of them had ever been to before. Driving down a narrow, forgotten road surrounded by towering trees, they eventually came to a dirt path barely visible through the undergrowth. David parked the car, and the two friends walked the rest of the way. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no rustling of leaves, just the sound of their footsteps crunching on the dirt beneath them. After a few minutes of walking, something caught their attention. Ahead, dangling from a low-hanging branch, was a small piece of paper. It was yellowed, as if it had been there for a while, yet it flapped gently in the breeze. David grabbed it and unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "Write down your phone number." They both laughed nervously, not sure whether to take it seriously or brush it off as some kind of prank. But when they turned the paper over, there was another, more cryptic message. "Give me your number, and I'll tell you more." "What do you think this is about?" Alex asked, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. "I don't know, but it's kind of weird, right?" David replied. He was half joking, half curious. There was something unsettling about finding such a personal request in the middle of nowhere. In a moment of impulsive curiosity, David scribbled his number on the note and pinned it back where they found it. But as they continued down the path, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon something else. Just a few feet off the path, a row of bras was draped over a fallen tree branch, 6 or 7 of them, hanging like forgotten remnants of a bizarre ritual. Nearby, there were random objects strewn about, empty packaging, a pot that had clearly been used to start a fire, and what looked like an old blanket spread out on the ground. The atmosphere was oppressive, as if the trees themselves were closing in around them. It was a scene that felt out of place, as though they had wandered into someone else's hidden world. The air seemed thicker, the silence more deafening than before. "We should get out of here," Alex said, his voice low. David agreed, and they quickly made their way back to the car. As they drove away, neither of them spoke, both feeling the weight of something unspoken. A few days later, David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. "Hi," David replied, asking who it was, but the only response he got was a chilling one. "I know where you live." That was enough for David. He blocked the number, deleted the app, and vowed never to use it again. But the memory of that day stayed with him. The eerie stillness of the forest, the strange objects, and the cryptic note. Who had left it? And what would have happened if they had stayed longer? If you found this story unsettling, make sure to like this video and share it with others who love exploring the unknown. Taylor's experience with Randonautica started much the same way. Curious after seeing numerous TikTok videos of other users' discoveries, she downloaded the app one evening and generated her first set of coordinates. The location it gave her was not far from her house, just a short walk to a small creek she had never noticed before. It seemed like an ordinary place at first, a small wooded area with a narrow stream running through it, overgrown with brush and weeds. As Taylor walked along the bank, she spotted something unusual, small pieces of paper scattered along the ground. At first glance, they appeared to be simple drawings, childlike doodles in faded crayon. But as she knelt down to pick one up, she realized there was something disturbing about them. The drawings depicted crude, twisted figures, their faces distorted with messages like, "Play with me," scrawled beneath them. Some showed strange symbols, ones Taylor didn't recognize. Her stomach churned with unease, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the unsettling images. The drawings were old, faded, as though they had been left there for some time, but they looked deliberate, as if someone had carefully placed them in specific spots, waiting to be found. As she gathered a few of the drawings to examine them further, she heard something. A faint whisper carried on the wind. It was barely audible at first, so soft she almost didn't notice it. But as she strained her ears, the whisper became clearer. "Play with me," the voice said again, this time louder. Taylor froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice sounded like that of a child, but the eerie stillness around her suggested otherwise. She scanned the area, her eyes darting from tree to tree, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as the whisper repeated. Closer now, more insistent. Without thinking, she dropped the drawings and bolted back toward the trail. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally in the silence, as though the woods themselves were amplifying the sound. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Once home, Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The drawings, the voice, none of it made sense. She uploaded the video of her experience to TikTok, and almost immediately, comments began pouring in. One viewer pointed out something she hadn't noticed before. Just behind her, in the shadow of a tree, was what appeared to be a small figure. It was faint, barely discernible, but it looked like a child peering out from behind the trunk. Taylor watched the video again, her heart racing as she spotted the figure herself. She hadn't seen it while filming, and no one had been with her at the time. Was it just a trick of the light, or had someone, been watching her? Despite the growing unease, Taylor returned to the creek a few days later. She had to know if the figure was real, or if her mind had been playing tricks on her. This time, the creek felt even more oppressive. The air was thicker, heavier, and the silence was almost unbearable. As she explored, she found more drawings, scattered in the same haphazard manner as before. But this time they were different, darker, more detailed, and far more disturbing. One drawing in particular caught her eye. It was a crude representation of a child, standing in a field with what looked like strange symbols surrounding them. The figure's eyes were wide, empty, as though staring directly at her. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the whisper again, louder this time. "Play with me," it called, and Taylor felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She turned, ready to run, but something stopped her. There in the distance, partially hidden by the trees, was the same figure she had seen in her video, the child watching her. Do you think Taylor was imagining it, or was there really something sinister watching her? Let us know in the comments below. A group of friends from Alabama, Davey, Ash, and Misa, decided to try their luck with Randonautica one night after seeing the app go viral. They were drawn to the idea of exploring unknown places and maybe even finding something spooky. They set the radius wide, allowing the app to take them anywhere within 30 miles. After a few uneventful coordinates, the app generated a location in a remote area near an old steel plant. The drive to the location was long and winding, the road narrowing as they ventured further into the woods. By the time they reached the coordinates, it was past midnight, and the darkness was absolute. The only light came from the moon, casting an eerie glow over the trees. The friends pulled over and stared at the narrow trail ahead of them, unsure if they should continue. The trail was surrounded by thick trees, their branches arching over the path like a canopy, blocking out what little light there was. A sense of foreboding settled over the group as they debated whether to go forward. But something about the place felt wrong, as if they were being watched. "We shouldn't go any further," Misa said, her voice barely a whisper. But Davy, ever the adventurer, convinced them to press on. They stepped out of the car, armed with nothing but their phones and a small flashlight. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. As they walked deeper into the woods, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, and the trails seemed to stretch endlessly before them. Eventually, they reached a clearing, and what they found there made their blood run cold. Scattered across the ground were old mattresses, each one neatly made, as if someone had just prepared them. Pillows, blankets, and sheets were laid out perfectly, but there was no sign of anyone around. The sight was eerie, out of place in the middle of the forest, and it filled them with a sense of dread. "We need to get out of here," Ash said, her voice trembling. They turned to leave, but just as they reached the edge of the clearing, Misa stopped dead in her tracks. "What is that?" she whispered, pointing to a small ditch on the side of the trail. There, partially hidden by dirt and leaves, was a red cooler. Curiosity got the better of them, and they approached the cooler cautiously. As they neared it, a foul smell filled the air, making their stomachs turn. Davy grabbed a stick and slowly pried the cooler open. The stench hit them full force, and they recoiled in horror as they saw what was inside: matted black hair, rotting, tangled in something unidentifiable. Panic surged through the group, and they ran back to the car, hearts pounding in their chests. They didn't stop driving until they were miles away from the trail, but the memory of that night stayed with them: the eerie silence, the mattresses, and the cooler with its horrific contents. They never returned to the trail, and Davy deleted the Randonautica app the next day. The sense of being watched, of something lurking in the shadows, was too much to bear. They still don't know what they found that night, but whatever it was something they were never meant to see. If this story kept you on edge, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another terrifying tale.